A very good evening to you. I'm Pearson Bowen. Prime Minister Frundle Stewart is assuring Barbadians tonight that there is room for redress for those harshly impacted by the municipal solid waste tax. He says he doesn't see a need for agitation or disquiet, adding that government will pay close attention to how it is working.
The Minister of Finance has powers under the legislation, and the former Prime Minister has been wise enough to highlight this, where he can exercise discretion, where hardships are most evident. And that happens with the land tax. There are people who, if their land tax obligations are thought to be imposing undue hardship on them, apply for relief and they get it.
Prime Minister Stewart made the comment while speaking to the media at the 35th regular meeting of CARICOM heads of government in Antigua. He also disclosed that he's studying a set of recommendations from experts of the International Monetary Fund who are asked by Barbados to do a review of the island's tax system. He says the report identified a number of issues that needed to be addressed to make it more efficient.
In fact, one of the questions that we have been asked, and this is not this government, that Barbados has been asked, why are you imposing taxes on people if you're going to take the tax with one hand and give them back with the other in all these allowances? If you're imposing a tax, impose the tax and get the revenue to do the things you want. But if you're going to impose the tax and then this allowance and that exemption and that zero rating and so on, you are defeating the purpose of imposing the tax in the first place.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says the issue of marijuana legislation is not one we can run away from indefinitely. He says there seems to be a strong determination among the heads to ensure that we are not duped in the debate. Sean Farr reports now that it is one of the issues discussed at the Heads of Government's conference in Antigua.
Prime Minister Stewart says marijuana use is gaining increasing respectability around the world. However, we are told by other countries that it's sinful, which we accept, while they gain a comparative and competitive advantage.
I don't know, though, that we won't have to wait too long for results on this. I can tell you that the producer countries are chomping at bit to get this whole issue resolved.
As far as the strategic plan is concerned, Prime Minister Stewart says Barbados is doing what it has to do in the areas of macroeconomic stabilization, competitiveness and growth. However, he says the island has to do more work in the areas of education and health.
So we have to get into the realm of preventive health care, where our people adopt healthier lifestyles, and this has to be a crusade across the country. So in terms of what Barbados has to do on that issue, I intend to make sure that the entire country is mobilized on that issue of health and wellness, because the status quo is totally unsatisfactory. In fact, the status quo is daunting.
One of the highlights of the conference was the engagement of the private sector in discussions on the strategic plan. Prime Minister Stewart hopes that this will be extended to the unions. Reporting from the 35th regular meeting of the CARICOM heads of government at the Sandals Grand in Antigua, I'm Sean Farrell for the CBC News.
Barbados hopes to restart negotiations soon with Trinidad and Tobago on a new fishing agreement. This disclosure from Ambassador to CARICOM Robert Bobby Morris, who is also part of that delegation attending the 35th regular meeting of CARICOM heads. Mr. Morris says the fishing agreement is a bilateral issue and was not part of the agenda for the CARICOM meeting. However, he says there is a protocol in place developed after discussions with several stakeholders that deals with the arrest of fishermen whether they are in Trinidad and Tobago or Barbados territory.
What we're waiting for is my going to Trinidad to present my letters of credence. I've done so far in relation to Bahamas, in relation to Guyana. I'm scheduled to go up to Jamaica on the 24th of this month. And when I do the Trinidad one, I'll be able to do that bilaterally, because unless I present my letters of credence, I am really Ambassador CARICOM. And that does not give me the right to go to Trinidad and negotiate a bilateral. So I think that is well on the way. And then after that, we really sit down to look at the wider issue of a fishing agreement.
Mr. Morris warns, however, that any new PAT will differ from the last agreement, which ended in 2006. He says, as it stands now, fishermen from either territory cannot enter the other country's exclusive economic zone without permission.
The reality is that you would know that there has not been an event in terms of fishermen going anywhere, because part of our role too is to let the fishermen know what their legal rights are, and with those rights become obligations. So we have been spending a lot of time with Barnufo, and Barnufo has been very, very helpful in this regard of training people not to break the law. The other thing I think you would want to note is that there are times when we can satisfy ourselves from fishing within our waters, and that has been happening recently. And in fact, sometimes when we have the issue of the sargasso moss, etc., nobody has the flying fish, neither Trinidad nor Barbados. So we're looking at the scientific issues and not only the legal issues.
In other news now, the private company responsible for producing cobbler pot has pulled out, but the head of the National Cultural Foundation says the show must go on. Cranston Brown told CBC News a short while ago that the foundation was advised by Premier Event Services that due to the current economic conditions, it could not stage the show. But he's given the assurance that cobbler pot will go on.
Well, we have always had a plan B, and therefore we would just institute plan B. We are responsible to the country for the production of crop over, and therefore we will produce the event in collaboration with our sponsors. There are some sponsors who are committed to the festival, committed to cobbler pot, and we will produce cobbler pot.
Mr. Brown says the NCF will issue a full statement on Monday outlining what changes will be made to the show. A new study done by the University of the West Indies has revealed that the Cayfield campus earns more foreign exchange for Barbados than either the rum or the sugar industry. And this was even in the face of government's budget cuts at the campus in 2013. The study, entitled Impact of the UWI Cayfield Campus on the Economy of Barbados, was led by Dr. Winston Moore, Senior Lecturer in the Department of Economics. He revealed the findings today during a news conference at the 3Ws Oval. The UWI Cayfield campus, according to that report, contributes about 2% of GDP, and Mr. Moore says his research shows that the figures relating to the university are underestimated.
The campus generated about $87 million in 2013. Barbados earned about $16 million from sugar, and about $86 million from rum exports. So the entire rum industry earned Barbados $86 million. The Cayfield campus generated $87 million in 2013 in foreign exchange, direct as well as indirect foreign exchange. And I think those numbers, to some extent, speak to the story that we haven't really been telling, and we probably need to tell a little bit more regarding the economic impact of the campus.
Dr. Moore is convinced that government could get bigger returns by investing more in the Cayfield campus and, by extension, tertiary education.
When we present numbers like these, it shows you that you are getting the return on investment because you're generating not only economic activity, but as well as foreign exchange as well. So the government is using Barbados dollars to finance the university at Cayfield and is generating US dollars from that. Now that, in my mind, is an interesting approach to doing economics. You're generating US dollars from Barbados dollars. There are not too many industries, besides the one that I sort of squashed this morning, the agricultural industry. There are not too many industries that you can convert Barbados dollars to US dollars.
The Nation Publishing Company has laid off 14 members of its staff. In a release, the newspaper said this followed consultations with the Barbados Workers' Union and includes persons who opted for voluntary redundancy and early retirement over the next 3 months. The Nation says contributing factors of operational efficiencies, technological enhancements and market changes necessitated this business decision. The company also expressed its thanks to the staff for their contribution over the years. A scare for a St. Michael family this morning. A huge ackee tree came crashing down on their home in the housing area at Crescent View, Eden Lodge, and a shaken Carol Hood, who lives with her two sons at Block 15H, told CBC News that the incident occurred after 7 this morning.
This morning I was in front. I was sitting down having my breakfast, and all of a sudden I hear this cracking noise, and I hear bam, but I didn't get it to look out right away to see what it was. And my big son hollered for me the same time, asked me where it is, so I tell him go and see where it is. So when the second child look out, he tell me the ackee tree fall down and a part right on the house. So when I come out, I see it right down.
Ms. Hood says she's been calling for that tree to be cut down for years now. She says she has not been able to assess the full extent of damage. We'll have more news ahead, but first, we'd like to hear from you on the question: do you believe that the UWI contributes more to Barbados' economy than the rum or sugar industry? Text yes or no to the short code 8111. We'll share the results at the end of the news.
Keep the entire family in shape with Bico Diabetic Delight, now just $14.99 VAT inclusive. Available in delicious vanilla, mango, and strawberry flavors. Offer available for a limited time only from participating retail outlets, Bico Mobilers, and the Bico Direct outlet. Bico Diabetic Delight. It's never been so easy to stay in shape. Now extended by popular demand.
Parents, are you tired of the hustle of back-to-school shopping? Then take your child's book list to one of Bryden's 3 locations, and their friendly staff will readily find your textbooks and school supplies for you. Bryden's, the trusted name that means books plus stationery.
Barbados stands to benefit from a press corps that feels it is free to perform its duties, and Editor-in-Chief of the Nation newspaper, Roy Morris, says this can only be the case if an up-to-date Freedom of Information Act is passed. Mr. Morris is one of the guests in The Spotlight, which will be aired at 9:30 on Sunday on 94.7 FM and at 10:30 on Sunday on QFM. Responding to a question on whether the media has lived up to its responsibilities since independence, Mr. Morris says it is amazing what journalists have been able to achieve in the absence of the legislation.
We really do need to look again at the environment. Those who have the wherewithal, the power to put the right legislation in place need to recognize that the country benefits from having a press corps that is not just free to perform, but feels that it is free to perform. And the way we operate sometimes, certainly the way I operate sometimes, I get the distinct feeling that it is almost as though you're doing it with some degree of trepidation.
Another guest, veteran journalist Ricky Singh, says the public do not try to understand the challenges in keeping up with the rapid changes in society.
They tend to either glamorize our work or punish us by unfounded criticisms, both of which are unfortunate, but we live with it. But I think that if they could reflect sometimes, as I hope that they do, on how fortunate they are to have a more widespread, diverse media to meet the challenges of modern-day Barbados, then perhaps there'll be less, there'll be more concern about keeping the media free from all kind of negative influences.
And that view was shared by the outgoing president of the Barbados Association of Journalists, Joel Ford.
People come to you with what they feel, what they hear, what they think, and then you as a journalist have to investigate the information that they've given you, such as it is, in order for you to bring that to light. I think people don't understand sometimes, especially in a Caribbean context, especially in a small developing society, where people know everybody and the relationships interlock, how difficult sometimes that can be.
A veteran educator is against calls for the scrapping of the 11+ exam. Lisa Broom has that story.
Outgoing principal of the Westbury Primary School, Michael Allen, while defending the exam, says those calling for it to be scrapped are not offering any alternatives. His comments came during the graduation ceremony for the class of 2014 at the St. Leonard's Anglican Church. Mr. Allen says the common entrance exam has served its purpose, noting that students of Westbury performed well this year.
Frederick Smith, Alexandra, Courage Paris, a small few going to Dolly Jordan, about 6 going to my school. Dr. Arthur, you didn't know that I had a school? The Allen School. Right. Right, Lester Vaughan, Foundation, Lodge. So you see that wherever you go, you will see Westbury in all the schools in Barbados.
Director of News and Current Affairs at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, Michelle Arthur, a former student of Westbury, says it has produced well-mannered students who have succeeded in many disciplines. She saluted the graduates and paid tribute to the teachers.
Some of us parents need to acknowledge that we get tired of our child who sleeps for the majority of the time that they're in our care. When they awake, we release them to teachers just glad for the break. And that's when they're most alert. Can you imagine then a teacher has to be all things that a child does not like? A babysitter, someone who tries to get them to understand new concepts, and also a disciplinarian. This 5 days a week. When we parents have you for the weekend, we tear our hair out. That's why I'm annoyed when I hear this discussion about teachers being good or bad.
The top boy at Westbury was Ravi Taylor, who will be attending Harrison College, and the top girl was Caitlin Clark. She is going to the St. Michael's School. Ravi, the most outstanding student, was also the valedictorian. He says the journey was not an easy one, but in the end, he succeeded. He also had these parting words for his classmates.
We have given of our best, and no matter which school we attend in September, what we do when we get there is entirely up to us. Remember, in life, we will have failures along the way, but we will start over and continue to reach for our dreams. Have pride in everything you do, and most of all, have pride in yourself, for this is where it must start. Be strong-minded and do not allow others to influence you to do the things that you know are wrong.
Lisa Broom, CBC News.
Well, regional news is next, but first, here's our reminder to you that we'd like to have your take on the question. Do you believe that the UWI contributes more to the Barbados economy than the rum or